I have it. That won't take very long. I have that won't take very long.
Yeah.
Amazing. What a sentence. I'm a wordsmith. The front fence. Oh my gosh, planes. Oh well, I'll just. With the front fence. With the front fence. I'm gonna lose my mind. Bah. I didn't think I needed safety glasses on to blow the sawdust off of the damn sled. We're doing great.
Doing great, sweetie.
Hello, welcome back. I am not a limber person. I'm showing a little ankle though. Last time we went through the process of building a lamp using scrap materials and kind of designing on the fly. And I really enjoyed the process of that, just not really being sure what I'm going to do, how exactly I'm going to accomplish it, but knowing where I wanted to wind up. Overall, a lot of fun, but I did realize that there are some jigs and setups that I don't currently have for my table saw that would have made things a lot easier, but also feel a lot safer, probably would have got cleaner, more accurate cuts. So we're gonna go ahead and build something today, and that something is gonna be a crosscut sled. So a crosscut sled rides in the miter slots and is gonna be perfectly square to the table saw blade. So the nice thing is, like, you have your fence that you can seat your material against, you run it through the blade, and then if you rotate that same piece, cut it the same way, it's perfectly square. I was able to find at least what I found to be a pretty interesting sheet of birch plywood that almost looks like a topographical map, and I wanted to use that because I think it looks neat. So on the front fence, I want to have some T-track, so that way I can include things like a stop block, again for repeated cuts. To me, one of the most daunting parts of building a crosscut sled is getting the fence square to the blade. Even if you have really precise tools, it's very easy to have your fence just be a little bit out of alignment, and even that little bit will cause some pretty noticeable compounding errors. Fortunately, Jonathan Katz-Moses has a fantastic crosscut sled calculator on his website. It looks like it's going to eliminate any of the guesswork and just make the whole process a lot more doable. To get started, we're going to use the track saw to cut a 36-inch wide segment out of the plywood. After that, we'll cut a 24-inch segment out, as the final dimensions of the crosscut sled are going to be 36 inches wide by 24 inches. As I'd like the usable depth of the crosscut sled to be approximately 20 inches, I went with 24 inches, as the combined width of both the front and rear fences should be about 4 inches total. Once the base of the sled was cut out, we're going to take the remaining plywood over to the table saw and cut 5 boards at 4 1/8 inches. The overall height of the fences is going to be 4 inches. The extra 1/8 is added in to account for any materials we might have to remove after the glue up to clean up the fence edges. When gluing up the fences, I decided to make my life unnecessarily difficult. The front fence, for whatever reason, I had in my mind that I did not want to use any metal fasteners, including pin nails, when assembling, and that I was just going to use clamps. With 3 boards being glued together, this resulted in all of them trying to move around when tightening the clamps, and as you can see, I was not winning this fight. Slip sliding all over. Oh, this is not going the way I want it.
But didn't you cut it a little bit over so you'd be able to, like, trim it down a bit?
A tiny bit, yes, but I don't want it that, I don't want it that bad. So I'm going to clamp the end first and hopefully clamp it enough that things aren't moving.
Clamp, stay.
No, you're moving a little bit, and I don't like that. I also clamped a level to the front fence just to make sure that it didn't warp or bow at all while the glue cured. Since this is a crosscut sled, we want to make sure that the reference fence is as flat as possible. I'm trying to like slide up and I'm like, can you not do that? Next, we'll move on to the rear fence, where I decided to be a little bit smarter and use pin nails to hold the two boards together. I didn't feel that it was necessary to add clamps. This board doesn't need to be precise, as it's only here for support. Now that the fences are glued up, we're going to go ahead and cut out the runners. So for the runners, I'm going to just rip a couple pieces of plywood to use. I'll have them be a little bit smaller than the miter slots in the table saw, and then just have them kind of wedged up to the sides. That way they'll fit and the table shouldn't be wiggling around or anything on the table saw. Originally, we were going to cut the runners in a way that the top face of the plywood would be attached to the bottom of the sled. However, due to some flex in the throat plate, these just weren't cutting as square as we needed them to be, and they weren't going to work. So we ended up just cutting some strips out of the plywood and using extra shims to ensure that they were snug against the outsides of the miter slots. To raise the runners out of the miter slots, we're going to use, oh, that was a good catch, biscuits. With the biscuits sanded down a bit to fit nicely in the miter slots, the runners are now lifted up enough that they'll be able to make contact with the underside of the miter sled. Here we're applying wood glue with dabs of CA glue to temporarily hold the runners to the crosscut sled. Once the CA glue is cured, we can use pin nails to provide clamping force until the wood glue dries. Originally, I was thinking I would use wood screws, however there were two issues. One, I didn't have any wood screws that were short enough, so they would have ended up just poking right through the top of the crosscut sled. I was also concerned that due to the orientation of the plywood runners, that putting a screw through would either cause them to bow or split.
Don't. Just don't.
Just don't. Now that the glue's had time to cure, we're going to go ahead and attach the fences. Alright, cool. Yeah, we'll run this side against the fence first. Trim this up and then set the fence to 4 inches even. After the glue up is done, we can take the fences to the table saw and trim them down to their final height of 4 inches. The rear fence was easy as it doesn't need to be perfectly squared or anything, it just needs to be attached. Once cut to the final dimensions, we can take the front fence and cut out a slot for some T-track that will be put in later. Once the rear fence is attached and our reference cut made, there's nothing else to do but attach the front fence. hopefully to kind of get myself as close as possible so I'm not having to make a whole bunch of different adjustments, I'm going to run the saw partway through the table, and then I'm going to use my little square here to square up my front fence to the saw blade itself as close as possible. I've got this clamped down. We're going to turn it over and put 2 screws in. One screw is going to remain. That's going to be my pivot screw. And then the other screw is going to be the one that, if this needs to be adjusted, we can remove it and swing this one direction or the other. I'll probably put in a third bracing screw also, just so that way, if I have 2 screws here, while this is a thick piece of wood, I just don't want it bowing it all and then throwing all of our measurements off. So this is the 5-cut method. I'm not going to go in depth because I'm not an expert at this. It's been a hot minute since I've done it, and there are so many people out there that have way more comprehensive videos on it. I am borrowing the method that was that Jonathan Katz-Moses did. He has a very handy calculator on his website that'll pretty much take a lot of the guesswork out of how to adjust everything. But the long short of it is, I've got this scrap piece of plywood. I'm going to cut this first reference edge, and then rotating it counterclockwise, we're going to keep cutting. Once we've hit all 4 sides, we're going to come back to our 5th side, or 5th cut, or side 1 again. Do 1 more cut, and then using that offcut, determine how out of square we are and how we have to adjust the fence. So you might not be able to pick it up on the camera, but I can already tell this side is a lot thinner than this side. So definitely out of square, but hopefully we'll be able to figure out roughly how much we need to actually adjust this here in a moment. So I'm going to go plug some numbers in and find out. That looks worse.
It does.
So I put the numbers in backwards. So there's an A and a B reference, and I flipped them around. So I just doubled the out of squareness of my sled. But fortunately, that's an easy fix. We know exactly what went wrong, and annoying as that may be, it's fixable. Everything is fixable.
2,000 years later.
So I moved my fence in the wrong direction, so that doubled the error. Fortunately, relatively easy fix. Like that was my bad, and it's just like, oh well, okay, adjust back in the other direction. We did that. Got really close. Had to make one more minor adjustment. I had a spacer block in the spacer. I removed the spacer, and when I was adjusting the fence, I don't know how, and maybe I don't think I clamped it down enough. It moved the spacer block, and I was just like, a little bit, had to do a couple runs of this. We finally got a calculation of adjusting our fence by 0.007 inches, 3 digits after the decimal point. And in the guide, it pretty much says, if you get to there, for the most part, take that and run. And I'm going to take it and run because, frankly, I'm tired. And I think that that's pretty darn close. Let's finish this thing up, put the screws in, and we have a table saw sled.
The next day.
Remember, we cut out the slot for the T-track here on the top. And this slots in perfectly. And that happened because I was smart enough to look up the dimensions that this was going to be and then cut a tiny bit oversized in both directions. Put some screws in. Look at that. No way that those are going to get lost and go all over the place. There we go. And just keep doing that. All right, that's in there. Hooray! Alright, T-track is installed, and while I don't have a stock block yet, I do have most of what I need to make one, and will be made eventually. I'm not going to get too in detail about aligning the fence, however, mistakes were made. Ooh, I'm going to trip. So, this was my pivot screw. This is the screw that was not going to move at any point. And then I used these two locations to hold the fence in place, and as you can see, it took 5 attempts until we had this thing pretty darn square. Also, on the underside here, we have this all waxed, and I would highly recommend that you constantly re-wax your crosscut sled, and if you have one that you haven't used in a while, maybe just touch it up, because if it's not moving smoothly through your table, it's just gonna frustrate you. Honestly, this moves so good, and my favorite part, if you notice, it doesn't wiggle around. It is pretty darn solid in the miter slots, so I don't have to worry about jostling a little bit and my cuts being thrown off. This is probably the best crosscut sled I've ever made, and I could not be happier. So let's see this thing in action. Alright, so these are the two sides we've cut on the crosscut sled. And that is pretty darn square. I'm very happy with that. It's nice to be able to get proper square cuts. This is going to make my life a lot easier. So, hooray.
Hooray.
For myself, with projects like these, making jigs that you want to have be very precise and very accurate, don't be afraid to make them. Don't be afraid to build things, because even if it's not great, you still built it, and that's how you get experience. I'm glad I didn't let my fear of this not turning out well prevent me from doing it. So, it's square.
Not another square.
Squares and cubes. I know there are a lot of crosscut videos out there, and I greatly appreciate you taking the time to watch mine. I hope you enjoyed the journey. This whole process was made easier by the calculator provided by Jonathan Katz-Moses. I'm going to provide the link down below, and I highly encourage you to go check it out. He's got so much cool stuff on his website, both tips, tricks, and tools that he's made and developed. Go give it a look, and hopefully it inspires you to go make something and not be afraid to make some mistakes. Thank you again so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.